Believe it or not, despite owning 6 iPhones over the last 5 years, and owning nearly everything else Apple, I've never owned an iPad. I've owned Android tablets, but they've let me down for the intended purpose. So in today's video, I want to talk about what makes the iPad different from its Android counterparts, how Apple's ecosystem all ties together, if the iPad can be a good desktop replacement, and if you need the latest and greatest iPad, or whether you should save money and buy used. The iPad featured in this video is a 3rd generation Pro model with the 11-inch screen and an M1 processor. For an iPad, an M1 processor is frankly overkill. However, this technological plateau means that for the price, you really can't go wrong with buying an older Pro. I paid £500 for my example, and minus some cosmetic damage and no oleophobic coating, it's in a fantastic shape and is literally half the price of the new Pro model, and £100 cheaper than the new Air. My used M1 Pro even has less than 100 charge cycles, and lives exactly to Apple's 10 hours of video watching screen on time estimate. I've been really enjoying how well optimized iPadOS is, particularly how opening apps is instant, an issue I've had on both of the Android tablets that I've owned. And I need to unlearn, again, that I can change music tracks or load up a Chrome tab on the tablet, instead of needing to get my phone out. And I like the fact that on the default view, you can open apps in a phone style. With Android, when you open an app in a pop-up view, the whole app has to redraw to the new window, which causes you to wait while the OS catches up. Here, the apps scale instantly. And if you want to put one of these smartphone scaled apps into full screen, your split screen apps stay as they are. Furthermore, Apple has introduced a pseudo desktop mode called Stage Manager. Your active apps get placed into a second dock on the left hand side. You can bring these apps in and out of the main space as needed. In the main space, you can resize apps too. And while the whole experience feels rather cramped on such a small screen, you can have multiple of these spaces, which is actually a really great feature for productivity. It's like a PC with virtual desktops attached. And continuing the theme of desktops, I like the fact that my keyboard works perfectly with iPadOS. That sounds like an awfully backhanded compliment, but what I mean is that there is a nice parity between macOS and iPadOS when it comes to keyboard shortcuts. The ones we're all familiar with, like Command-Tab or Command-Shift-3, all work. And hardware keyboard buttons like brightness control or the volume dial work on iPadOS, while they did not work on HyperOS. In every app, you can hold down Command to bring up the keyboard shortcuts, which was great for me relearning how to use Final Cut. So my point is, the iPad is still not a computer, but at least it acts like one. As a little side note, I do love how integrated all of Apple's products are. We have multi-point with AirPods. Any apps or websites that you have open on your iPhone show up on the iPad's dock, and you can even answer phone calls from your iPhone on the iPad. I wanted to get some work done on the iPad while my laptop was sent off for repair and will probably be stuck in RMA hell for a while. Firstly, I had some shoots that I needed to edit. Transferring my pictures onto Lightroom couldn't be any easier. Lightroom can directly offload pictures from cameras with P2P protocol, allowing you to preview which pictures you want to copy, and then they automatically upload straight onto the cloud for editing on any device. Likewise, Lightroom can also import pictures from the Files app, if you're offloading your pictures via an SD card. Mind you, Lightroom can also do this on iPhone too, so it's not all that special. But regardless, Lightroom on mobile is pretty fantastic. It's of course a shame it relies on a server-based solution, instead of on local files like Lightroom Classic, but it does exactly what you want it to, and the M1 chip is plenty fast at rendering the images. With the screen being nice and color accurate, it also means I don't have to proof check the images on a separate display. Not much to complain about here at all. Is what I would have said, except as it turns out, mobile Lightroom doesn't give you an option to import presets, which required me to download Lightroom on my NAS to import them into Lightroom to be able to use them on mobile. Also, there is no HDR merge. On a positive note, however, and as a common theme for our iOS and iPadOS, Lightroom is far more optimized for a tablet interface than on Android, with there being more buttons on screen, as well as generally feeling smoother. The great thing with the iPad is that I can use Genki Studio or Orion to use my tablet in conjunction with my capture card as both a display for my games consoles or to record footage from them. Of course, by extension, you can do this on iPhones too, kind of a common theme with this segment, but you can also AirPlay the capture card for wireless gaming, minus the input latency of course. But hey, Final Cut isn't available on iOS, so let's talk about it. It's admittedly a little clunky. I do love the fact that you can drop images, videos and music from external drives, cloud services or local servers, and import them into Final Cut, but the Files app has its own fair share of issues, just like Final Cut on iPadOS. I still haven't found a way to group external audio and video, or even a way to automatically sync audio like on the desktop version. But at least the M1 shines here, with me editing 4K HDR video with no problem, even with multiple clips being added onto the timeline. We even get effects like drop shadows and audio tools like compressors. Final Cut is really the best with a keyboard and mouse, because moving the timeline with your finger causes you to accidentally move clips around or move the playhead, while on a keyboard you can just hold shift and use arrow keys. And a keyboard does allow for more precise editing, as well as of course being able to use keyboard shortcuts, saving time versus having to do everything with your finger. Regardless, however, Final Cut on iPadOS is just too clunky to be able to use it on any big project. No adjustment layers, no audio syncing, a limit of 2 video layers, no custom loot support, etc. Just really brings it all down. I can edit my videos on it fine, but it's not a get up and go solution. It's like editing a Hollywood movie on Camtasia Studio. That being said, I do like the fact I can plug in my dock and get some semi-professional work done on the iPad, then I can just unplug my dock, get back to bed, and use the same device to watch YouTube on. That is such a powerful feeling that you don't get with a traditional laptop. Like Lightroom, Photoshop on iPadOS isn't as well featured as it is on desktop. To stop myself repeating what I've already just said, I will just quickly say that it does the job for basic image manipulation, but you wouldn't want to do any serious work on it, that's for sure. Is the iPad any good for gaming? Yeah? For the AAA games that you can get on iOS, which there aren't many, you can actually flex the M1's muscle quite a fair bit. GTA 3 Definitive Edition runs at the highest quality resolution, though it is locked to 30 FPS, and is nowhere near native resolution, but I did notice less stutters than on my 15 Pro. Resident Evil 4 likewise ran at a locked 30 FPS during the introduction part, though the resolution is rather awful, with what looks almost like dithering artifacts on screen, which I presume is some sort of upscaling or anti-aliasing. It's still impressive that we can play current console generation games on the iPad, though the compromises that come with it are heavy. If you don't own a console and you only own an iPad, it's still better than nothing, that's for sure. And if you're a retro gamer, Delta for iPadOS is coming soon. And even better, we have RetroArch. We finally have RetroArch, and I've been loving playing PS1 games on it, though of course you can play a huge variety of games. Sadly, there is no PS2 era emulation yet, and possibly never will be, due to Apple banning any apps that use just-in-time compilers on the App Store. But at least with the PS1 we can do hardware intensive things, like add CRT filters, remove warping, and increase render resolution with no speed loss. The quad speakers on the Pro are shockingly good, with rich vocals and what sounds like artificial widening applied, which creates a rich surround effect. And in the right environment, they can pack a nice amount of bass too. The speakers are decently loud, but I was expecting a bit more, seeing as we have 4 of them. So, anything else I don't like about the iPad Pro? Yes, actually. The camera placement is idiotic. This in turn means Face ID doesn't work as well as it possibly could. The front-facing camera, however, is insane in just how wide the focal length is. I can fit this whole room in the frame. It is seriously the widest angle front-facing camera that I've ever used, beating out the current winner, which is the Moto X Style. Another thing I dislike is the screen. Well, not the screen itself, but the fact that this tablet cost close to $1,000 when it was new, and yet it doesn't feature a mini LED or an OLED panel. It's honestly not any better or worse than the display of my £300 Xiaomi tablet, which is disappointing. It does also suffer from ghosting, which is the most noticeable during swiping on the home screen, as opposed to when watching content, but it's still unacceptable at this price range, especially with the fact that it's a high refresh rate display. So in conclusion, is the iPad Pro a desktop replacement? Absolutely not. Owning one has not made me change my mind on the fact that buying one as a primary device is a waste of money. You are limited in app availability, and with the desktop apps that have made it onto iPadOS, you are having to work with their limitations, unlike on a Mac or Windows PC. And for the price of the iPad Pro, it is just a bit of a rip-off. But for the £500 I paid, well, the value proposition makes far more sense here. Half the cost of a MacBook for half the features. But no, seriously, iPadOS itself is solid, and the iPad Pro is a joy to use in how smooth and fast it is. It's a big iPhone of multitasking with Android-like features, and that's not a bad thing. It's just really not a pro device, but it's still a decent travel companion, and ties well into the Apple ecosystem. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you for the next video.